Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. Listen, if you're going to haul cargo through the outer margin, and let's be honest, if you're out there, something in your life has gone spectacularly wrong, you learn to accept weird pretty quickly. Three-eyed pilots who navigate by tasting cosmic radiation? Sure. Engineers who communicate through bioluminescent butt flashes? Why not? But the crew of the merchant vessel, Drifting Promise, had seen some things that made even seasoned space trash, like them raise an eyebrow, or two or six, depending on how many you had. The weirdest thing on board, by unanimous vote, was Cass. Not because she was human, though that certainly contributed to the general unease. Humans had a reputation, after all, something about being Death World survivors with a concerning enthusiasm for duct tape and terrible decisions. No, Cass was weird because of the helmet. The damned helmet. She wore it constantly. During cargo shifts, during meals, during the sleep cycles when any reasonable person would want to, be comfortable. It was a battered thing, this helmet. Military grade, sure, but that grade had clearly expired sometime around the last solar cycle. Scorch marks decorated one side like some kind of abstract art installation. The visor was scratched to hell, and there was a dent on the crown that looked suspiciously like something had tried to cave her skull in and only partially succeeded. "Does she shower in that thing?" Sola had asked once, her compound eyes glittering with genuine scientific curiosity. The insectoid engineer was methodical about everything, including her confusion. Captain Roth, all 6 of his Centaurian arms busy with various tasks, had just shrugged 4 shoulders in response. Probably. Haven't asked. Won't ask. Human business is human business. And I didn't survive 30 cycles in space by sticking my nose, or noses, depending on the species, into things that don't concern me. Wise words from a wise captain. Rin, the ship's navigator, had pulsed a soft blue, their species equivalent of a thoughtful hum. The jellyfish-like being floated near the ceiling, tendrils swaying gently in the recycled air. Pain, they'd observed quietly. The helmet, it holds pain. No one had argued with that assessment. Rin was empathic, could sense emotional currents like most people sensed a stiff breeze. If they said the helmet was connected to pain, well, that was that. Cass herself never explained it. She did her job, and did it damn well, which was why Roth kept her on despite the general weirdness. Former military, demolitions expert, now hauling cargo through the lawless stretches of space where people didn't ask too many questions about your past. She could calculate blast yields in her head, could squeeze a ship through asteroid fields that would make other pilots weep, and she had the kind of dark humor that came from seeing things you couldn't unsee. "Morning, Cap," she'd say, that helmet turning toward Roth as she entered the bridge. Her voice came through slightly filtered, given the audio processors in the damn thing. "Ready for another day of not dying horribly?" "That's the dream," Roth would reply, because really, what else could you say to that? 3 years. 3 years she'd been on the Drifting Promise, and 3 years she'd worn that helmet. It was just part of her now, like Sola's tool belt, or Roth's lucky compass, or Rin's collection of star charts that no one else could read. Then the Cubs came aboard. Oh, the Cubs! The Nalcari were apex predators, the kind of species that made other species nervously check their insurance policies. Bipedal, powerfully muscled, with retractable claws that could shred through most standard hull materials if they really put their minds to it. Their senses were sharp enough to detect a heartbeat from 3 rooms away. They were, in short, absolutely terrifying, which made the three cubs currently hiding in the ventilation shaft above the cargo bay somehow both adorable and deeply unsettling. Ip, Shale, and Fen. Refugees from a colony that didn't exist anymore. Orbital strike, quick and brutal. The kind of thing that happened in the outer margin when someone upset someone else with bigger guns. The cubs had survived because their parents had shoved them into escape pods with about 30 seconds of warning. Now they were being transported to a Nalcari settlement 3 systems away. And in the meantime, they were the drifting promises problem. And oh, were they a problem. "They're in the vents again," Sola reported, her antenna twitching with annoyance. "I can hear them skittering around up there." "They're children," Rin said gently, pulsing a soft yellow. "Traumatized children. They're seeking small spaces. Safety." "They're predators," Sola countered. "Very small, very fast predators who keep stealing my tools." Roth sighed with 3 of his mouths. "How long until we reach the settlement?" 5 more days, Cass said from her position near the cargo manifest screen. The helmet turned slightly as she scrolled through inventory. "Think we can survive 5 more days without a mutiny?" "Mutiny implies organization," Roth muttered. "I'd settle for 5 more days without chaos." The universe, as it tends to do, laughed at that sentiment. The cubs were fascinated by Cass. Maybe it was because she was human, and humans were rare enough in the outer margin to be interesting. Maybe it was because she moved like someone who'd been hunted before, efficient, aware, always checking exits. Or maybe, just maybe, it was because of that damn helmet. Ip was the oldest, the boldest. He'd watch Cass from the shadows, golden eyes tracking her movements with predatory focus. Shell was quieter, more analytical, studying the human like a particularly complex puzzle. And little Fen, still jumping at loud noises, still waking up screaming from nightmares, he seemed drawn to Cass in a way that made Rin pulse sad blues and greens. "Recognizes trauma," the navigator had observed. "Calls to like." Day 8 of having the cubs aboard started like any other day, which should have been everyone's first warning. Cass was in the lower maintenance bay, running diagnostics on the cargo clamps. Standard procedure, boring as hell, exactly the kind of work that let her mind go quiet. And that's when the helmet started hissing. Not a loud hiss, just a small escape of pressure from one of the seals near the left audio processor. Annoying. Fixable. She'd been meaning to repair it for weeks, but kept putting it off because, well, that would mean taking the helmet off, and that was complicated. But the hiss was getting worse, and Cass was nothing if not practical about survival. A malfunctioning helmet was worse than no helmet at all. At least, that's what she told herself as she reached up and, for the first time in 3 months, released the seals. The helmet came off with a soft click and a sigh of equalizing pressure. The universe became very, very loud. Cass's jaw clenched immediately. The hum of the ship's engines, normally filtered to a gentle background whisper, now roared in her ears. The clicking of cooling metal in the bulkheads sounded like gunshots. Her own breathing was deafening. She set the helmet down on the workbench with shaking hands, then forced herself to take a breath. Just a minute. Just long enough to grab the seal repair kit from the storage locker 3 meters away. She could do this. She could handle 3 meters. She made it 2 meters before the sound of footsteps in the corridor above made her freeze, her heart rate spiking so fast she felt dizzy. Just Sola. Just the engineer doing rounds. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. Her hands were still shaking when she grabbed the repair kit and turned back to the workbench. The helmet was gone. Cass stared at the empty space where it had been, her mind refusing to process the information for a solid 3 seconds. Then training kicked in. Scan the room. Check the angles. Assess the threat. There, in the ventilation grate above the workbench, 3 pairs of golden eyes gleamed in the darkness. "No," Cass said quietly. Then, louder. "No, no, no!" But the eyes were already disappearing, and with them, the only thing standing between Cass and the crushing weight of every sound in the universe. The cubs had taken the helmet, and for the first time since joining the crew of the Drifting Promise, Cass felt something that made even her own survival instincts scream in warning. Pure, undiluted panic. The thing about Nalcari cubs that most species don't appreciate, usually because they're too busy running away, is that they're not just physically dangerous. They're smart. Really smart. The kind of smart that combines predatory instincts with genuine curiosity, which is either delightful or terrifying depending on whether you're watching from a safe distance or currently being hunted. Ip clutched the helmet to his chest as he scrambled through the ventilation system, his siblings close behind. The metal was still warm from the human's body heat, and it smelled like, well, like a human who'd been wearing the same piece of equipment for 3 months straight. Sweat, metal, something acrid that might have been fear or might have been determination. Hard to tell with humans. "Did you see her face?" Shael hissed, her voice pitched low even though they were already 3 corridors away. "She looked scared," Fen finished quietly. The smallest cub brought up the rear, his claws clicking softly against the metal as they moved. "Really scared." "Good," Ip said, though his tail twitched with uncertainty. "She's always watching us, like we're going to do something wrong. Let her feel watched for once." They dropped down into the lower cargo hold, their territory, the place the crew had more or less surrendered to them after the 3rd time Roth had tried to coax them out with food and gotten a face full of warning growls. It wasn't much, just a nest of spare blankets and tarps wedged between 2 cargo containers, but it was theirs. Safe. Hidden. Ip set the helmet down in the center of their little den like a trophy. All 3 cubs stared at it, fascinated. "It's ugly," Shael observed, tilting her head. "Why does she wear this thing all the time?" "Maybe human heads are fragile," Fen suggested. "Maybe she needs it for protection." "From what?" Ip reached out, running a claw along one of the scorch marks. "We're on a cargo ship. Nothing here is going to hurt her." "Maybe something already did," Shael said softly, and that made all 3 of them go quiet for a moment. Ip shook off the thought. He was the oldest, which made him the leader, which meant he couldn't afford to get all soft and thoughtful like his sister. He picked up the helmet, turning it over in his hands. It was heavier than he expected, and there were panels and switches he didn't recognize. Human military tech, probably. The colony had warned them about that before. Before? He pushed that thought away, too. "I'm trying it on," he announced. "That's a bad idea," Shael said immediately. "It's a great idea," Ip countered, "because that's how sibling dynamics work across species. If someone says it's a bad idea, you absolutely have to do it." He lifted the helmet up and lowered it onto his head. It was too big. Humans apparently had larger heads than Nalcari, go figure, but he could still see out of the visor once he adjusted it. The inside smelled even stronger, and there was a weird padding that pressed against his ears in a way that wasn't entirely unpleasant. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the inside of the helmet lit up. Ip yelped. He'd deny it later, claim it was a tactical alert sound, as lines of text and symbols suddenly appeared in his field of vision, glowing a soft green against the darkness. Numbers scrolled past, diagrams he didn't understand, status readings for systems he'd never heard of. "What's happening?" Fen asked, his voice tight with worry. "Ip, are you okay?" "It's showing me things," Ip said, his voice muffled by the helmet. "Some kind of display? I think it's military." The display changed. One moment it was showing technical readouts, the next it was showing something else. Movement. Shapes. Colors that didn't make sense until suddenly they did. And Ip realized he was seeing through someone else's eyes. Through Cass's eyes. The image was grainy, corrupted in places like a damaged recording, but it was clear enough. Darkness. The smell of burnt metal and something worse. Flesh. Burning flesh. The sound of breathing, harsh and panicked, echoing in an enclosed space. And then light, sudden and blinding, as an explosion tore through what looked like a tunnel. Screaming. So much screaming. Ip's hands flew to the helmet, yanking it off with enough force that he nearly fell backward. He sat there, chest heaving, staring at the innocent-looking piece of equipment now lying in front of him. "What?" Shale demanded, moving closer. "What did you see?" "War," Ip said quietly. "I saw war." Shale and Fen exchanged glances. They knew war. They'd heard it, felt it, lost everything to it. But seeing it through someone else's memories? That was different. That was invasive. That was... "I want to try," Shale said. "No," Ip started. But his sister was already reaching for the helmet. "You don't get to decide for me," she said, which was fair. She lifted the helmet, smaller than Ip, she had to hold it at an angle, and lowered it onto her head. The same green glow illuminated her features from within. She stood very still for a long moment, and then her breath caught. "I see," she whispered. "People. So many people. They're hurt. She's trying to help them, but there's too much blood. She can't stop it. She's trying, but..." Shale ripped the helmet off, breathing hard. Her eyes were wide, showing white around the golden irises. "It's not just combat footage," she said. "It's connected to her somehow. Neural interface, maybe? These are her memories." "That's impossible," Ip said. "Military equipment doesn't store personal memories. It's against protocol." "Then maybe someone broke protocol," Shale shot back. "Or maybe she doesn't know it's recording. Either way, these aren't just images. They're pieces of her." Both older cubs turned to look at Fen, who had been very quiet. The smallest cub was staring at the helmet with an expression that was hard to read, even for his siblings. "Fen," Ip said gently, "you don't have to?" "I want to," Fen interrupted. His voice was small, but steady. "If you two can be brave, so can I." He picked up the helmet before either of them could argue and settled it onto his head with more grace than his siblings had managed. The helmet swallowed him. He looked absurd, this tiny predator cub wearing human military gear, but he didn't take it off right away. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, not moving, barely breathing. When he finally removed the helmet, his movements were careful, deliberate. He set it down gently, like it might break, and looked at his siblings with eyes that seemed older than they had a moment ago. "She wasn't in a battle," he said quietly. "Not in the one I saw. She was alone, sitting in the dark. And everything was quiet. Too quiet. Like when the world goes away, and you're the only one left in it. She was holding this helmet and crying, but there was no sound. Like the crying was inside. Silence filled their little den. The kind of silence that holds weight, that presses down on you until you have to say something, anything, to make it stop. "We took something important," Shael said finally. "This isn't just equipment. This is protection," Fen finished. "Not from enemies, from herself, from everything." Ip's tail lashed once, twice. He was the oldest. He was supposed to know what to do. But staring at this battered piece of human military hardware, he felt just as lost as the day the escape pod had sealed and he'd watched his home turn to fire. "She's going to come looking for it," he said. "Let her," Shael replied. "Maybe she should explain why she needs it so badly." "Or maybe we should just give it back," Fen suggested, his voice very small. "It's hers. We took something we shouldn't have." "No," Ip said, and there was steel in his voice now. "We give it back when she tells us the truth. We're not some cubs who don't understand things. We've seen war. We've lost our home. If she's carrying something like that around," he gestured to the helmet, "then she should know she's not the only one who understands what it means to survive something that breaks you." The sound of boots on metal echoed through the cargo hold, heavy, running, desperate. All three cubs tensed, predatory instincts flaring even as guilt twisted in their stomachs. Cass had found them. The human appeared around the corner of the cargo container, and for a moment, all they could do was stare at each other. Cass without her helmet looked different. Younger, maybe, or older, it was hard to tell. Her short hair was matted with sweat, and her eyes were too wide, scanning the space like she was waiting for an attack from every angle at once. "Give it back," Cass said, and her voice was wrong. Too controlled. The kind of controlled that came right before everything fell apart. "Please, just give it back." Ip stood up, placing himself between his siblings and the human. He could smell her now. Fierce sweat, adrenaline, something that pinged every hunting instinct in his young body. She was prey right now, and they were predators, and every bit of biology was screaming at him to press the advantage. But he'd also just seen what lived inside her head. And that changed things. "What are you hiding from?" he asked, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Human." Cass flinched like he'd struck her. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides, and for a moment Ip thought she might just rush them, might try to take the helmet by force. Instead, she did something none of them expected. She sat down. Right there, on the cold metal floor of the cargo hold, Cass just folded. Dropped onto a cargo crate like her legs had given up supporting her weight. She pressed her palms against her temples, eyes squeezed shut, shoulders hunched like she was trying to make herself smaller. "Everything," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm hiding from everything." And in that moment, 3 predator cubs looked at a human warrior and recognized something they'd been trying very hard not to see in themselves. Someone who'd survived, but barely. Someone who was still surviving, day by day, hour by hour, behind whatever armor they could find. The helmet sat between them like a barrier and a bridge, all at once. Here's the thing about breakdowns. They don't always look like breakdowns. Sometimes they look like a woman sitting very still on a cargo crate, hands pressed to her temples, breathing in counts of 4, because that's what the training manual said to do when the world got too loud and your brain started cataloging every possible threat in a 300-meter radius. The crew had gathered at the entrance to the cargo hold. Roth, Sola, and Rin, drawn by the sound of running boots and the kind of silence that follows when something important breaks. They stayed back, though. This wasn't their moment. This was something happening between a human and 3 cubs who'd just learned that trauma doesn't care about species. "The Ganith uprising," Cass said finally, her voice flat. professional. The kind of tone you use when you're describing something that happened to someone else, even though everyone knows it happened to you. Anyone here remember that mess? Sola's antennae twitched. Mining colony dispute. 3 cycles ago. Got ugly. Got ugly, Cass repeated, and something that might have been a laugh escaped her throat. Wrong sound. Too sharp. Yeah, that's one way to put it. Another way would be complete tactical failure, resulting in the deaths of 300 soldiers in underground tunnel systems that weren't on any of our maps. EP's ears flattened. He'd been in enough briefings, back when there were adults to give briefings, to know what those words meant. Ambush, slaughter, the kind of operation where you send people in and most of them don't come back. I was demo, Cass continued, staring at her hands like they belonged to someone else. Demolitions expert. My job was to clear paths, set charges, make sure our people had exits. Ironic, right? The exit specialist was the only one who made it out. Cass, Roth started, his voice gentle. They knew we were coming, Cass cut him off. The Ganith. They'd rigged the tunnels, collapsed half of them while we were inside. My squad was in Sector 9, deepest part of the complex. We heard it go. This sound like the whole world breaking apart. Then, darkness, dust, screaming. Shale had moved closer without realizing it, drawn by the story despite herself. How many survived the collapse? In my sector? Just me. Cass's hands were shaking now, trembling against her temples. I was at the rear, checking a junction. When the ceiling came down, I had maybe 2 meters of clearance. Everyone else... She didn't finish that sentence. Didn't need to. 5 days, she continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. 5 days I was down there. My helmet kept me alive. Oxygen recycler, emergency rations, water reclaimer, military-grade equipment designed for exactly this kind of situation. I should have been grateful. I should have been thankful for every breath it gave me. But, Fen asked softly. But I could hear them, Cass said, and now her voice cracked. The Ganith soldiers. They were on the other side of the rubble, in the tunnels above me, walking around, searching, and every time they found someone, every time they found one of my people who'd survived the collapse, I heard it. The pleading, the begging, the shots. The cargo hold was completely silent except for the distant hum of the ship's engines. Even that seemed muted, respectful. 23 executions, Cass said, each word precise and terrible. I counted. I couldn't not count. And I couldn't do anything except sit there in the dark with my fancy military helmet, feeding me oxygen and keeping me alive, while I listened to every single one of them die. Roth had moved closer, all 6 arms hanging at his sides in a gesture of helplessness. You survived. That's not something to feel guilty about. Isn't it? Cass looked up at him, and her eyes were dry. Too dry. Like she'd burned through all her tears a long time ago. I had the equipment. I had the training. I should have been able to do something. But I just sat there, quiet as a mouse, praying they wouldn't hear me breathing, praying I'd live. That's not cowardice, Sola said firmly. That's survival. The helmet had audio dampening, Cass continued like she hadn't heard. Environmental noise reduction. It was designed to protect soldiers from acoustic weapons, from the sound of explosions that could rupture eardrums. But down there, in that tunnel, it became something else. It became the only thing between me and the sounds that would have driven me insane. She pressed her palms harder against her temples, like she could physically hold her skull together through willpower alone. When they finally dug me out, when the rescue teams found me 5 days later, I'd been in sensory deprivation mode for 120 hours. The helmet had shut down everything except life support. No sound, no light, just darkness and my own breathing. The medics said I was catatonic when they pulled me out. Wouldn't respond, wouldn't speak. They had to pry the helmet off me, and I fought them. Actually fought them. Rin pulsed a deep, sorrowful purple. You emerged from the earth as someone new, reborn through trauma. Poetic, Cass said, but there was no heat in it. The military called it acute auditory hypervigilance. Said it would fade with time and therapy. Gave me some pills, some breathing exercises, a medical discharge with honors. Told me I was a hero, a survivor. You are, Ip said, surprised by his own voice. Am I? Cass finally looked directly at him. Because here's the thing, Cub. Here's the part they don't tell you about surviving. After they dug me out, after the hospitals and the therapy, and the well-meaning people telling me how strong I was, I couldn't handle normal anymore. Every sound became a threat. Footsteps in the hallway? Could be an enemy patrol. A door closing? Could be a cave-in starting. Someone laughing? Could be the sound right before the screaming starts. She gestured at the helmet, still sitting in their makeshift den. That helmet filters the world, makes it manageable. Without it, I hear everything at once, every conversation, every mechanical sound, every footstep, every breath. It's like living in a constant ambush, like being back in that tunnel with the world collapsing around me. Shale's tail had gone completely still, a sign of intense focus in her species. The neural interface, she said carefully. It's been recording. Your memories, your experiences. Did you know? Cass blinked, the question clearly catching her off guard. What? When we put it on, Ip explained, we saw things, flashes, images, your images, memories of the tunnels, of afterwards. It's all stored in there somehow. The color drained from Cass's face. That's not possible. Neural interfaces are wiped before discharge. Standard protocol. They can't store personal data. It's illegal under... Well, someone broke protocol, Shale interrupted. Because we saw it. All of it. Cass sat very still for a moment, processing this information. Then, quietly. What did you see? War, Ip said simply. Pain. Someone trying to survive when survival felt impossible. Fen took a small step forward, his voice barely audible. We saw you alone, sitting in darkness, not making any sound at all, like you were trying to disappear. Something in Cass's expression shifted. Not softening, exactly, but cracking. Like a wall with a fracture running through it, holding together through sheer stubbornness. Our colony, Fen continued, his words coming faster now like they'd been dammed up and were finally breaking free. We heard it coming. The attack. We were in the residential dome when the alarms started. Our parents, they grabbed us, threw us in the escape pods. We heard them sealing the doors, heard them saying goodbye. And then... His voice failed. Shell moved closer, pressing her shoulder against her little brother's side. We heard the impact, she finished for him. The explosion. We were already in space by then, in the pods, but we heard it through the emergency channels. Everyone screaming, everything ending. And Fen still wakes up every night thinking he's hearing it again. Every night, Fen whispered. Sometimes twice. Sometimes I'm not even asleep. I'll just be sitting there and suddenly I'm back in the pod, hearing the world end, and I can't make it stop. Ip's claws extended and retracted, a nervous gesture. We know what it's like to survive something that kills the people around you. We know what it's like to carry sounds in your head that you can't get rid of. So when you ask what we're hiding from, human, we could ask you the same question." Cass stared at the three cubs, these apex predators who'd been reduced to frightened children by circumstances beyond their control, and something in her chest twisted painfully. "You're children," she said finally. "You shouldn't have to understand this." "But we do," Shael replied. "And pretending we don't, pretending you don't, doesn't make it hurt less. It just makes it lonelier." Rin drifted closer from the entrance, tendrils moving in slow, graceful patterns. "Shared pain," they said softly. "Not diminished, but distributed. Bearable." Roth cleared his throat with three of his mouths. "The cub has a point. You've been alone with this for 3 cycles, Cass. Maybe that's long enough?" Cass looked at the helmet, looked at the cubs, looked at her crew, her weird, dysfunctional, absolutely insane crew who'd never once asked her to explain herself until this moment. "I don't know how to be without it," she admitted, her voice small. "The helmet. It's been my armor for so long. Without it, I'm just broken." "Not broken," Ip said, walking forward until he was close enough to touch the helmet. He picked it up carefully, reverently, and extended it toward her. "Wounded. There's a difference. Wounded things can heal." "With help," Shael added, moving to stand beside her brother. "You can't heal alone. We learned that. The hard way." Fen joined his siblings, the 3 of them forming a line between Cass and the helmet that was both offering and challenge. "We'll give it back," Ip said. "But we want you to know, you're not alone anymore. Not if you don't want to be." Cass reached out with shaking hands and took the helmet. For a moment, the urge to put it on immediately was overwhelming. Safety, protection, quiet. But she forced herself to just hold it, to sit there in the noise of the cargo hold with 3 predator cubs and a crew who'd seen her at her worst and hadn't run away. "Okay," she said finally, her voice rough. "Okay. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a cure. But it was a start. And sometimes, that's all survival really is. One start at a time, until you've started enough times that you're actually living again. The beautiful thing about breakthrough moments, and let's be clear, they're only beautiful in hindsight, is that they don't fix everything. Life isn't a fairy tale where one honest conversation magically heals all wounds and everyone skips off into the sunset holding hands, or paws, or tendrils, whatever. But they do change things. Cass sat in the cargo hold for another 20 minutes, just holding the helmet. The cubs had retreated to their den, giving her space but not leaving entirely. It was a compromise that spoke volumes about the strange understanding they'd reached. "We see you. We're here. But we're not pushing." Roth was the first to break the silence, because captains have to be practical even when everything's gone sideways. "Sola," he said quietly, "can you do anything about that helmet? Make it more reliable? Less likely to fail at an inconvenient moment?" The engineer's antennae twitched thoughtfully. "Maybe, if I could examine it properly. The neural interface alone is fascinating. Military-grade equipment, at least a decade old. I could probably update the systems, reinforce the seals, maybe even create a backup." "A backup," Cass interrupted, looking up sharply. "You could make another one?" "Not another helmet, exactly," Sola clarified. "But I could create a secondary filtering system. Something smaller, less conspicuous. So you're not dependent on a single piece of failing equipment. If one system goes down, you'd have a fallback." For the first time since the cubs had stolen the helmet, something like hope flickered across Cass's face. That would be practical," Roth finished. And long overdue. You're part of this crew, Cass. We take care of our own. Should have asked earlier if there was anything we could do to help. I didn't exactly make it easy to ask, Cass admitted. No, Rin agreed, pulsing a warm orange. But some burdens are carried alone until someone else offers to share the weight. We offer now. Cass nodded slowly, then stood up. Her movements were careful, deliberate, like she was testing whether her legs would still support her. She walked over to the cub's den and crouched down to their eye level. Thank you, she said simply, for pushing, for not letting me hide. Ip's ears perked forward. We're good at not letting people hide. It's kind of our thing. Predator instincts, Shyle added with what might have been a smile, if Nalcari could smile. They couldn't, but the intent was there. Does this mean you're going to stop being weird about the helmet? Fen asked, with the blunt honesty that only the very young can get away with. Cass let out a breath that was almost a laugh. I'm going to try to be less weird about it. Can't promise miracles. We don't need miracles, Ip said, just honesty, and maybe sometimes taking it off, on purpose, not because someone stole it. Deal, Cass agreed. That's when Sola made a discovery that changed everything from a personal crisis into something far more complicated. The engineer had been examining the helmet's internal systems while the emotional reunions happened, because Sola was nothing, if not efficient with her time. Her compound eyes suddenly went very still, the insectoid equivalent of a human's eyes going wide. Captain, she said carefully, you need to see this. Roth moved closer, two of his arms crossing while the other four gestured inquiringly. What am I looking at? Data, Sola said. Thousands of hours of recorded data. Combat footage, operational details, command communications, tactical assessments. This helmet has been recording everything since it was first issued. And it was never wiped. The temperature in the cargo hold seemed to drop several degrees. That's not possible, Cass said, standing up so fast she nearly lost her balance. Neural interfaces are automatically wiped during discharge processing. It's mandatory. There are fail-safes. Someone disabled the fail-safes, Sola interrupted. Recently, within the last 6 months. There's a modification to the core programming that's definitely not standard issue. Cass's hand went to her hip, where a sidearm would have been if she still carried one. Old instincts. Someone's been accessing my helmet? Or someone wanted the data preserved, Roth said grimly. The question is why. Rin drifted closer, tendrils moving in agitated patterns. What kind of data? Specifically. Sola scrolled through the interface projected from her handheld scanner. Everything from the Ganith uprising, full tactical records, command decisions, communications between officers, and... She paused, her antennae going completely flat. Evidence of war crimes, multiple incidents, covered up by both sides. The silence that followed was the kind that makes your ears ring. They used me, Cass said quietly, her voice distant. Someone in the military chain knew I'd keep wearing it, knew I couldn't function without it. They turned my trauma into a storage device. Hidden in plain sight, Ip said from the den. No one would think to look for classified intelligence in a broken soldier's helmet. That's cold, Shale added. Even for adults, that's really cold. Roth's expression had gone hard, all 6 of his hands curling into fists. This puts us in danger. If someone knows that data exists, if they're tracking it, they'll come for it, Cass finished. They'll come for me. Then we use it first, Sola said firmly. We copy everything, distribute it to multiple sources. News agencies, military oversight committees, independent investigators. Make it public before they can silence it. That's treason, Cass said automatically. Theft of military intelligence, court-martial offense, life imprisonment. Only if they catch you, Roth pointed out. And only if you're still military. Which you're not. You're civilian crew on a merchant vessel that happens to be carrying evidence of crimes that need to be exposed. Rin pulsed a determined blue. Truth over orders. Always. Cass looked down at the helmet in her hands. This thing that had saved her life. This thing that had imprisoned her. This thing that now held the power to expose corruption at the highest levels of the military that had abandoned her. If we do this, she said slowly, there's no going back. I'll be a target. The ship will be a target. We're already targets, Roth said with a shrug of all 6 shoulders. We haul cargo through the outer margin. Everything out here wants to kill us anyway. Might as well have a good reason. I can create an encrypted backup within the hour, Sola added. Multiple copies, distributed through anonymous channels. By the time anyone realizes what happened, it'll be everywhere. Cass looked at her crew. Her weird, impossible, absolutely insane crew who'd somehow become the closest thing she had to family. Then she looked at the cubs, 3 orphaned predators who understood what it meant to lose everything and keep going anyway. Okay, she said, let's blow this thing wide open. The next few hours were controlled chaos. Sola worked on the helmet's systems, copying data and creating the backup filtering device she'd promised. Roth contacted encrypted channels he definitely shouldn't have had access to. The benefits of 30 cycles hauling cargo meant you knew people who knew people. Rin coordinated distribution schedules, their mathematical mind plotting release timings across multiple jurisdictions. And Cass? Cass did something she hadn't done in 3 years. She sat in the common area with the cubs, testing her limits with the ambient noise. The helmet was within reach. She'd put it on the table between them, close enough to grab if needed. But for the moment, it was off. Voluntarily. The engine hum was uncomfortable. The ventilation system sounded like thunder. Her own heartbeat was deafening. But Fen was telling a story about something ridiculous Ip had done back on their colony. And Shale was correcting details with sibling precision. And their voices were manageable, almost pleasant, worth the discomfort. You're doing it, Ip observed, his golden eyes tracking her reactions. Actually sitting without the helmet. Don't get too excited, Cass said, her voice tight. I give it another 5 minutes before I need to put it back on. 5 minutes is 5 minutes more than yesterday, Shale pointed out. Progress is progress, Fen added sagely, which was hilarious coming from the smallest cub who still sometimes needed comfort after nightmares. Cass smiled. Actually smiled. It felt strange on her face, like she'd forgotten how the muscles worked. When did you all get so wise? We're apex predators, Ip said proudly. We're born wise. You're born hungry and screamy, Shale corrected. The wisdom is optional. Captain Roth appeared in the doorway, watching the scene with something that might have been paternal pride if Centaurians did that sort of thing. Data's distributed, he announced. By morning, half the galaxy is going to be reading about the Ganith uprising's covered-up atrocities. Military. Command is going to have a very bad day. Good, Cass said simply. Also, Roth added, Sola finished the backup system. It's not pretty, but it works. You'll have redundancy. Thank you, Cass said, and meant it. The helmet sat on the table, no longer a prison, no longer her only lifeline, but a reminder of survival, of trauma, of the fact that sometimes the things that keep you alive can also keep you trapped, until someone forces you to see the difference. Ip reached out and put one clawed hand on the helmet, almost ceremonial. This thing saved you, but you saved yourself too. Remember that. I'll try, Cass said. Fen climbed up onto the bench beside her, settling against her side with the casual trust that cubs showed only to pack members. Shael joined on the other side. Ip remained standing, self-appointed guardian of this strange little family they'd formed. Outside the viewports, the stars streamed past as the drifting promise continued its journey through the outer margin. Inside, a broken human and 3 orphaned predators sat together in comfortable, almost quiet, proving that sometimes the strangest combinations make the strongest bonds. And if Cass reached for the helmet after 8 minutes instead of 5, well, progress isn't linear. But it's still progress, and sometimes that's more than enough.